Hello, Professor Didi here. Today I'm going to talk to you about international political economy. I'm going to use a lot of economic terms. If you've taken an economics class, some of this information may bore you a little bit, but it's designed to give you a basic idea of some terms and things like that as far as how international political economy works. Political economy is the study of how a state and the economy interact and influence on each other. The government relies on a strong economy to give it the revenue it needs for spending. Policy choices have economic ramifications. In 1992, when Bill Clinton ran for president, his theme was, "It's the economy, stupid." Even with the Lewinsky scandal, Clinton retained his popularity despite being impeached. Americans generally care more about the economy than any other issue. The 2020 election had a lot of economic undertones to it. Policy efficiency. Does the policy work and how much does it cost? What are the benefits of the policy? When it comes to making public policy in economics, the key is if we do a policy, how much will it cost? Will it work? A lot of times in the 80s, people talked about putting teens who were disruptive in the boot camps. Studies showed it wasn't that effective, but it was politically popular, so the policy stayed in place. An efficient policy is one that gives the state and the people the greatest benefit at the lowest cost. Sometimes the cheapest idea is the worst, but that's all you can afford. Think about it when buying a car. One car may be more expensive than the other, but the car that's more expensive may get better mileage and be safer. Keynesian economics was a dominant theory of the 20th century based on the ideas of British economist John Maynard Keynes. His theory argued that private sector business decisions sometimes lead to ineffective economic outcomes and advocated policy responses by government. Keynes said in bad times, increased spending and welfare helps because it makes recessions milder and shorter. In good times, cool inflation with tax increases. Deficit spending is okay because we owe the money to ourselves. In the long run, we'll all be dead. Milton Friedman was a conservative economist who embraced economic theories that government regulation of the economy was out and the free market economics was in. The economic crisis of 2008 led many people to rediscover Keynesian economics. When it comes to the economy and the government, the key in any economy is supply and demand. You do not want a high supply and low demand for anything, or a low supply and high demand. The problems in the American economy that plagued presidents since the 1960s in managing the economy is one solution often creates a range of other problems. Unemployment occurs when a person is available to work and is seeking work, but currently is without work. Unemployment is usually measured by the unemployment rate, the number of people getting unemployment assistance. But we often fail to examine underemployment. That's the person who is an IT-savvy genius, but is now working at Best Buy. In other words, his full brain power isn't being used in the area he knows. Inflation is the rise in services of prices and goods, and services meaning dollars buy fewer goods and services. Inflation is the erosion of purchasing power in money. Inflation, too many dollars chasing too few goods. When it comes to taxes, or sometimes people like to say revenue enhancements, how much is too much? Lyndon Johnson and President Bush, number 43, engaged in 2 wars without paying for them. In war, you must increase taxes to offset spending. Clinton increased taxes and cut spending to grow the economy and cut deficits. Wage and price freezes were often tried in the 1970s, but it had many failures. Packaging became smaller and a lot different. There was a time where a half gallon of ice cream was actually half a gallon of ice cream, but over time that half gallon has gotten a lot smaller. In the 1970s, you had a lot of oil shock, with oil prices jumping dramatically, which offset a lot of things and altered spending. Interest rates are used as a tool to shape economic policy and can be very effective. Low rates encourage spending like crazy. High rates, you use to cool inflation and decrease spending. The Federal Reserve Board sets interest rates. The problem of government debt is often the interest on the debt. Think about your credit card. It's not the money you have to pay, it's the interest on the money you owe. Jimmy Carter wanted to stimulate the economy, but this made inflation worse. Tax cuts can be very effective, as long as they're done well and targeted well. Reagan cut taxes 25% over 3 years, using supply-side economics, so the money would go to the poor and stimulate the economy. But it caused massive budget deficits. Tax cuts grew the economy, but the economy unfortunately grew into debt. Lowering taxes encourages more growth and leads to more government revenue. Bush 43 cut taxes, but it led to higher deficits. The Trump tax cuts, corporations got those tax cuts, and instead of spending them to grow their own companies, what they ended up doing is buying back stock. Budget deficits occur when the government takes in less money than it spends. Deficits will occur. Reagan and Bush cut taxes and increased military spending, thinking Congress would reduce domestic spending, but it didn't do that. Federal government issues treasury bonds for people to borrow money. High interest rates led many countries to invest in the United States. Much of the U.S. debt is covered by foreign investment. Trade deficits become a problem when Americans buy too many goods from foreign countries and foreign countries don't buy enough of our products. Government debt has been a problem. The problem is the way to tackle the debt, people don't want to do it. That includes entitlement reform, that includes tax increases, that includes dramatic spending cuts. But one person who sees a government program as wasteful spending, another sees it as their oxygen. A lot of people talk about outsourcing, having other people do jobs, but a lot of people get upset for crazy reasons when other countries are doing work Americans don't want to do. Poverty. What is poverty? Defining poverty is tricky. Poor in New York might be rich in West Virginia. A person making $100,000 a year in San Francisco is having a hard time. A person making $100,000 a year in Western Maryland or on the Eastern Shore is probably doing quite well. The government over its history has waged a lot of programs, wars on poverty, designed to help people and get them out of situations. The key to any economic success, to get people out of poverty, is better education. The more well-educated a society is, the less poverty you have. Medicare is a government national insurance program that guarantees access to health insurance for Americans 65 and older who have worked and paid into the system, and younger people with disabilities. Medicare provides health care for poor people and people already on welfare. And as I said, tax revenue creates this program. These programs are popular, and it's hard to get rid of because people like these programs. Medicaid is another program that is very popular among people. It's designed to help the poor. You may say, well, why give all this assistance to poor people? When people can't go to work, they're not working. The idea is provide them with free health care, and they'll go to the doctor and get well. Also their kids. They can take care of them. That's why a lot of these programs are in place. Republicans and Democratic leaders have handled social welfare policy a lot differently. Democrats took the lead in devising the programs. Republicans have maintained a lead in trying to keep them as small as possible. Clinton in 1996 signed a major welfare reform package to end welfare as we know it. The idea was to put the responsibility on the states for welfare and to have them create programs to get people jobs. Healthcare has been a major obstacle in the political economy. The Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, passed in 2010, operates with private insurers without a public option. Critics say the plan is too complex and expensive, but it has saved people a lot of money. The ironic thing is, when people are asked about Obamacare, people will say they don't like it, but when you explain what the Affordable Care Act is, people like the provisions in the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are the same thing. That's one of our problems in our politics. How big should the government be? Americans are unclear and undecided at times whether the federal government should be bigger or smaller. When there are programs people like, they want the government more involved. When it's programs people think, what do I care about farm subsidies? People want the government a lot smaller. At times when it comes to the economy, the issue is to regulate or not regulate. Laissez-faire capitalism holds business interests should be allowed to act without government interference. Less regulation, at times though, equals more corruption. Increased savings rates and more competition among companies help the economy. But here's the thing, the government doesn't want you to save your money. They want you to spend your money. Because when you spend your money, you're growing the economy. Bramwell's disease involves the rise in salaries in jobs that have experienced no increase in labor production in response to rising salaries in jobs that have experienced labor production. The rise in wages in jobs without production gains is caused by the necessity to keep employers in jobs that have experienced gains. Here's an example of that. A company comes to an area and is paying a really good salary, and everyone wants to work there for the money. The problem is you have to keep salaries in pace for other occupations so people don't say, I'm getting out of teaching because I can make more money working in a factory. That's one of the problems when it comes to economics. Trying to make sure people get a good wage, but trying to make sure that people who are in professions they want to be in stay in those professions. Globalization is a huge factor in the economy of a state. And the reason jobs are set overseas is a couple things. First, it provides economic stability in those countries. Second, they can make the product cheaper, which saves Americans money. If you were to have American companies produce Reeboks and computers, we couldn't afford a lot of Reeboks and computers. Economics can be a complex thing, and a lot of people get frustrated with the economy. People want to see things prosperous all the time. The thing is, it can't always be that way. But our economy today, on this date, is better than any time ever in our history. And that may sound odd whether the economic times are good or bad. We're better than the Great Depression. There are more economic opportunities out there today. The key is finding them and seeking them out. Most importantly of all, take care. Have a great day.